The child pointed at the dog, saying, "He knows." When the mother understood, her world collapsed. A mother's heart stopped when her 3-year-old daughter kept pointing at their family dog, whispering the same chilling words over and over. "He knows, Mommy. He knows." What happened next would change everything. Sarah Mitchell had always considered herself a rational person. A pediatric nurse by profession, she dealt with facts, symptoms, and diagnoses. Superstition and intuition weren't part of her vocabulary. But on that cold October evening, everything she believed about the world would be challenged in the most unexpected way. It started innocently enough. Little Emma, just 3 years old, was playing in the living room with her toys while Sarah prepared dinner in the kitchen. Their golden retriever, Max, lay by Emma's feet as he always did. Max had been with the family since before Emma was born, a loyal, gentle giant who had appointed himself the child's protector from day one. Sarah heard Emma's voice drift from the living room, that sweet, high-pitched tone children use when talking to pets. Nothing unusual. She stirred the pasta sauce and smiled to herself, grateful for the peaceful moment. Her husband David was working late again, and these quiet evenings with Emma were precious. Then Emma's voice changed. "Mommy," she called out, urgency coloring her words. "Mommy, come here." Sarah wiped her hands on a kitchen towel and walked into the living room, expecting to find a broken toy or perhaps a request for a snack. Instead, she found Emma standing in the middle of the room, her small finger pointed directly at Max, who sat perfectly still, his dark eyes fixed on the child with an intensity Sarah had never seen before. "What is it, sweetheart?" Sarah asked, kneeling beside her daughter. Emma didn't look at her mother. Her eyes remained locked on Max. "He knows," she whispered. Sarah felt a slight chill run down her spine, but pushed it away. "He knows what, honey?" "He knows," Emma repeated louder this time. "He knows about the bad thing." Have you ever experienced a moment when a child said something that made you question everything? Keep reading, because what Sarah discovered would make her realize that sometimes the most innocent observers see what we choose to ignore. Sarah tried to laugh it off. "What bad thing, Emma? There's no bad thing. Max is a good dog." But Emma shook her head vigorously, her blonde curls bouncing. "Not Max. Max is good. But he knows about the bad thing. He saw." The rational part of Sarah's brain told her this was just a child's imagination running wild. Emma was at that age where reality and fantasy blended together. Last week, she'd insisted there was a fairy living in the garden shed. The week before, she'd been convinced her stuffed elephant could talk when no one was watching. But something about this felt different. Max hadn't moved. He remained seated, his gaze unwavering, his body tense in a way Sarah had never observed before. It was as if the dog was trying to communicate something, waiting for Sarah to understand. "Emma, baby, you're scaring Mommy a little bit," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice light and steady. "Can you tell me what you mean? What did Max see?" Emma finally looked at her mother, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Her daughter's blue eyes were filled with something that looked disturbingly like pity, an expression far too mature for a 3-year-old face. "The man who comes when Daddy's not here," Emma said simply, as if she were describing what she had for breakfast. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Sarah felt her heart hammering against her ribs. "What man, Emma? What are you talking about?" "The man who makes you cry in the kitchen," Emma continued, her voice matter-of-fact, as if she were describing what she had for breakfast. "The one who comes and talks angry. Max growls at him, but you tell Max to be quiet. Remember?" Sarah's mouth drew dry. She struggled to find words, her mind racing through the past few weeks trying to make sense of what Emma was saying. There had been no man, no visitor. She would remember something like that. Wouldn't she? That night, after Emma had been tucked into bed, Sarah sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea she couldn't bring herself to drink. Max lay at her feet, and she found herself studying him as if seeing him for the first time. "What do you know, boy?" she whispered. Max lifted his head and looked at her with those soulful brown eyes. For a moment, she could have sworn the dog understood exactly what she was asking. Her phone buzzed, a text from David. "Working late again. Don't wait up." She stared at the message, and something clicked in her mind. A pattern she hadn't allowed herself to see. David had been working late 3 or 4 times a week for the past 2 months. He'd been distant, distracted. There had been hushed phone calls he'd taken in the garage. unexplained charges on their credit card that he'd dismissed as work expenses. Sarah had noticed all of it, hadn't she? But she had chosen not to see, not to question, not to confront the reality that was hiding in plain sight. This is the moment where everything changes. If you've ever ignored warning signs in your own life, you know how Sarah feels right now. But here's the question. What do you do when you can no longer pretend? Stay with us. The truth is about to surface. The next morning, Sarah called in sick to work, something she rarely did. After dropping Emma at preschool, she drove home with a sense of purpose she couldn't quite explain. Max greeted her at the door, tail wagging, and she bent down to scratch behind his ears. "Show me," she whispered to the dog. "Show me what you know." She felt ridiculous talking to Max as if he could respond, as if he could lead her to answers. But desperation makes us do strange things, and Sarah was desperate to understand what Emma meant, what truth was lurking in her own home that she had been blind to. Max walked to the living room window and sat, looking out at the street. He did this sometimes, watched the neighborhood, tracked the mail carrier, observed the neighbors walking their own dogs. But today his posture was different, alert, waiting. Sarah sat beside him and waited too. 20 minutes passed, then 30. She was about to give up when a car she didn't recognize pulled into her driveway. A silver sedan, not old but not new, with tinted windows.
Max's body went rigid. A low growl rumbled in his chest, something Sarah had heard perhaps twice in the 5 years they'd owned him. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. He was in his 40s, wearing jeans and a dark jacket, unremarkable in every way except for the key he pulled from his pocket, a key that opened Sarah's front door. Sarah's blood ran cold. She stayed hidden behind the curtain as the man entered her house, as if he belonged there. Max's growl grew louder, and Sarah quickly grabbed his collar, shushing him, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. The man walked through her home with casual familiarity. He went to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, took out a beer, as if he did this every day. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Yeah, it's me," he said. "I'm at the house. She's at work. No, the kid's at school. I don't know, maybe an hour or two." Sarah couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. Who was this man? How did he have a key to her house? How long had this been happening? The man walked toward the stairs, presumably heading to the bedrooms, and Sarah knew she had to get out. She couldn't confront him, not alone, not without knowing who he was or what he was capable of. She slipped out the back door with Max, her hands shaking as she fumbled with her phone to call the police. The next few hours were a blur of police officers, questions, and revelations that shattered Sarah's reality into a million pieces. The man's name was Marcus Webb. He was David's business partner, something David had never mentioned to Sarah. For the past 6 months, David had given Marcus access to their home to use as a safe space for meetings with clients David didn't want seen at their office. But that wasn't the worst of it. The police investigation uncovered that David and Marcus were involved in financial fraud, using their business to launder money for a local crime ring. David had been keeping Sarah in the dark, trying to protect her from the truth, but in doing so, he'd brought danger directly into their home, mere feet from where their daughter slept. When confronted, David broke down. He admitted everything: the illegal dealings, the lies, the risk he'd exposed his family to. "He thought I could fix it before you ever found out," he sobbed. "I thought I could protect you." But he hadn't protected them. He'd put them in danger. And the only one who'd tried to warn Sarah was Max, the loyal dog who had growled at Marcus every time he entered, and Emma, the observant child who'd noticed what the adults chose to ignore. When everything you thought you knew crumbles, what's left? For Sarah, it was a choice: stay in denial or face the painful truth and rebuild. If you're facing your own moment of truth, know this: Acknowledging reality is the first step toward reclaiming your life. 6 months later, Sarah sat in her new apartment, smaller than the house, but truly hers. Emma played nearby with her toys, and Max snoozed in a patch of sunlight streaming through the window. David was in prison, serving a 5-year sentence. The divorce had been finalized. Their old house had been sold to pay legal fees and restitution. Sarah had lost almost everything: her marriage, her home, her financial security, the future she had planned. But she'd gained something too: clarity, truth, agency over her own life. She'd learned to trust her instincts again, to pay attention to the warning signs she'd dismissed before. She'd learned that sometimes the people closest to you see things you can't or won't, including 3-year-olds and family dogs. Emma came over and climbed into Sarah's lap. "Mommy, is Max happy here?" Sarah looked at the dog, now 7 years old, graying around the muzzle, but still protective, still loyal, still that steady presence that tried to tell her something was wrong. "I think Max is happy, sweetheart. I think we're all going to be okay." "Good, because Max knows when we're safe. He told me." Sarah kissed the top of her daughter's head and smiled. She no longer dismissed such statements as childish imagination. She'd learned that sometimes truth comes from the most unexpected sources, and wisdom doesn't always wear the face we expect. The lesson in the story.
What happened to Sarah Mitchell isn't unique. Every day, people ignore warning signs in their lives, not because they're foolish, but because the truth is sometimes too painful to face. We rationalize, we excuse, we explain away the things that don't add up because confronting them means our lives will change, and change is terrifying. But here's what Sarah's story teaches us. The cost of denial is always higher than the cost of truth. Children see what we miss because they haven't yet learned to lie to themselves. Animals sense what we ignore because they haven't been taught to override their instincts. And when both are trying to tell you something, it's worth listening. Max wasn't psychic. He simply responded to what his senses told him, that Marcus was a threat, that something wasn't right. Emma wasn't gifted with special powers. She simply observed what was happening around her and reported it honestly, the way children do before they learn that some truths make adults uncomfortable. Sarah's mistake wasn't failing to read minds or predict the future. Her mistake was dismissing the evidence that was right in front of her because accepting it would have meant admitting her life wasn't what she thought it was. What can we learn? 1. Trust your instincts. Sarah had felt something was off with David for months. She'd noticed the late nights, the secretive phone calls, the emotional distance, but she'd talked herself out of trusting her gut. When your instincts tell you something is wrong, investigate rather than dismiss. Listen to those who love you. The people and even the animals who care about us often see what we can't. They're not invested in maintaining our illusions. They're invested in our well-being. When someone who loves you expresses concern, don't automatically assume they're wrong or overreacting. Children notice everything. Children are observant in ways we often underestimate. They pick up on tension, inconsistencies, and changes in routine. When a child expresses worry or confusion about something, take the time to understand what they've observed. They might be seeing something important. Denial has a price. Ignoring problems doesn't make them go away. It just allows them to grow bigger and more dangerous. Sarah's denial didn't protect her. It left her vulnerable. Facing difficult truths is painful, but it's also empowering. You can rebuild. Even when your world collapses, you can rebuild from the rubble. Sarah lost her marriage, her home, and her financial security, but she gained something more valuable: the truth, her self-respect, and the chance to create an authentic life. Recovery is possible, but it starts with acknowledgement. Are you ignoring warning signs in your own life? Take a moment today to honestly assess what you might be avoiding.
Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply admit what you already know. The power of paying attention. In our busy lives, it's easy to go through the motions, to avoid looking too closely at the things that make us uncomfortable. We tell ourselves we're too tired to deal with problems, too busy to investigate concerns, too invested in the status quo to rock the boat. But Sarah's story reminds us that paying attention, really paying attention to the world around us and the people and animals in it, can save us from devastating consequences. It's not about being paranoid or suspicious, it's about being present and honest with ourselves. Max didn't solve Sarah's problems. Emma didn't magically reveal the truth with supernatural powers. They simply paid attention and tried to communicate what they observed. Sarah's breakthrough came when she finally allowed herself to see what had been there all along. Questions for reflection. As you think about Sarah's story, consider these questions for your own life. What warning signs have I been dismissing or rationalizing? Who in my life has been trying to tell me something I don't want to hear? What truth am I avoiding because accepting it would mean my life has to change? What would it look like to trust my instincts more? If I knew what I suspect is true, what would I do differently? These aren't easy questions, and they might not have comfortable answers, but asking them is the first step towards living an authentic, empowered life. Moving forward. Sarah's journey didn't end with the discovery of David's betrayal. That was just the beginning. The real work came in the months that followed, rebuilding her life, processing her trauma, learning to trust again, and forgiving herself for the signs she'd missed. She went to therapy. She leaned on friends and family. She focused on creating stability for Emma. And slowly, piece by piece, she reconstructed a life that was based on truth rather than illusion. It wasn't the life she'd planned. It was better because it was real. The apartment was smaller, but it was a space where she didn't have to walk on eggshells or pretend everything was fine. The budget was tighter, but the money she spent was hers, earned honestly without the shadow of criminal activity hanging over it. The future was uncertain, but it was a future she was actively creating rather than one being built on lies. And Emma continued to talk to Max, to share her observations, to see the world with the clarity that children possess. Sarah no longer dismissed her daughter's insights. She'd learned that wisdom comes in many forms, and sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important messages. If Sarah's story resonates with you, don't wait for your world to collapse before taking action. Trust yourself. Listen to those who care about you. Face uncomfortable truths now while you still have the power to choose your response. You deserve a life built on honesty, and it's never too late to start creating it. Final thoughts. The title of this story, "The Child Pointed at the Dog, Saying, He Knows," captures a moment of revelation, but it's really about something much bigger. The danger of denying reality and the power of paying attention to truth, no matter how uncomfortable. Sarah's world collapsed, yes, but from the rubble she built something stronger and more authentic. Her daughter learned that speaking truth is valued, even when it's difficult. And Max, he remained the loyal guardian he'd always been, content in the knowledge that his family was finally safe. The next time someone tries to tell you something you don't want to hear, whether it's a child, a pet, a friend, or your own inner voice, don't dismiss it out of hand. Investigate, consider, be brave enough to look at what you might be avoiding. Because He Knows isn't just about a dog observing a threat. It's about all the ways truth tries to reach us, if only we're willing to see. Your own Max might be trying to tell you something right now. Your own Emma might be pointing at something you've been avoiding. The question is, are you ready to listen? Don't let your world collapse before you pay attention. Start today. Trust your instincts, listen to those who love you, and have the courage to face whatever truth you've been avoiding. Your future self will thank you for it.